There's always some skill or topic which interests us, and we take the help of books, the internet, and a lot of other resources available out there in order to develop our acumen related to that topic or skill. But how often do you actually retain what you learn? How often do you struggle to remember the key points of an amazing self-improvement book you just read a few weeks ago, which you thought could deeply impact your life? Or how often do you remember the information from a video you just watched a few days ago? Not very often, right? Which is what I'm going to talk about in this video. How to actually retain and remember what you learn. Because optimized learning and the ability to remember things well is crucial in this day and age when information is jam-packed. It doesn't matter how many books you read as long as you don't remember what you learned from those books. And if you don't recall what you learned, you've simply wasted your time. So let us dive right into it without any further ado. Okay, so a little bit of context. So essentially you have a short-term as well as a long-term memory. And whenever you read a book, watch a video, or are exposed to any kind of information for that matter, that information gets stored in your short-term memory for a while before it gets dissipated. And the key to retaining what you learn is to put that information in the long-term memory. Do keep in mind that for the information to transcend to the long-term memory from the short-term memory, it has to pass through the working memory, which acts as a bottleneck or metaphorically somewhat of a semi-permeable membrane, which means there's only a fixed amount of information which can be passed on to the long-term memory at once. And all the tips and tricks I'm going to be sharing in this video will help you pass on the information to the long-term memory before it disappears from the short-term memory. Now that you know the nitty-gritty of how your memory works, let's get to the core of this video. As straightforward as it may sound, taking notes can deeply affect how much you actually end up remembering. This is so because when you're taking notes, by which I mean handwritten notes, you engage with the information you just learned, and whilst doing so, you also put in some effort to make the notes, right? Which is when your brain recognizes the effort you put in and it ratifies that information into the long-term memory. Hence, you end up retaining it. Here are a few things you need to consider. Firstly, you need to take notes immediately after you've learned something, or real-time notes may work just as fine. And you can take notes on a notepad or simply the margin of the book you've been reading. And secondly, why I suggest handwritten notes is because it takes much effort than just typing the notes down. The more effort you put in, the easier it gets for your brain to recognize the information and store it. And lastly, you must have the will or intention to remember the information you've learnt, because blindly taking notes with zero concentration will not help, as we know for a fact that our thoughts and the way we think can manifest itself. And it applies in this case too. Okay, so the next point in this list is trying to recall what you've learned for even a minute can work remarkably in terms of how much you actually end up remembering. In this case as well, your brain engages with the information you've just learned, making it easier for the information to revert to the long-term memory. And just so you know, trying to recall what you've learned also makes you practice the skill of remembering. As we know, practicing something makes us better at it. The Feynman technique can also prove to be useful in this case. The Feynman technique is part of the work of Richard Feynman, an American physicist. So this technique in its best light would be: Step 1. Write the name of the concept at the top of a blank piece of paper. Step 2. Write down an explanation of the concept on the page. Use plain English. Pretend you are teaching it to someone who is not familiar with the concept. This should highlight what you understand, but more importantly, take notice of the things you weren't able to articulate well. Step 3. Review what you didn't know. Go back to the source material, reread it, and relearn it. Repeat step 2. Step 4. If you're using convoluted language or simply paraphrasing the source material, try again so you filter the content. Simplify your language and use simple analogies wherever possible. That's all about the Feynman technique. Now, all of this might seem like monotonous work, but this is a very powerful practice, and this is bound to give you the best results. As it is said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Next up, tip 3. It is said, unapplied knowledge is no knowledge at all, and that truly makes a lot of sense. Knowledge alone is not power. Knowledge alone is just potential power. What power truly is applied knowledge. Applying what you learn can boost your retention capacities big time, and it's the best way to remember what you learned. So make sure you always find a way to apply what you've learned in real life. That brings us to the fourth and final tip, which is don't plunge into a great deal of information at once. Why do I say this? Because in this digital age, we are bombarded with a ton of information with every Instagram scroll, and that's a lot. Even while watching YouTube videos, the algorithm can be a bit harsh. You get so many videos in the watch next section with so much information crammed up, and that's too much. This overabundance of information is certainly bad in terms of remembering. Remember, I told you how the short-term memory can only store a limited amount of information at once? By constantly exposing your short-term memory to an oversupply of information can lead to one piece of information being replaced by another and so forth. And you'll end up remembering nothing. It's the same case with multitasking while absorbing information as well. So take your time, take it slow, one thing at a time, and do use the above mentioned tips in order to embed the just learned information in your long-term memory. So that's pretty much it. That concludes all the 4 tips. Now, once you're done watching this video, do remember to recall what you've learned from this video. Don't immediately jump on to the next video. Keep that in mind. Hopefully these tips will be of use to you in acquiring knowledge in general. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, hit the bell icon, and that's it. Oh, and if you're wondering what's up with the cap, yeah.